I am hoping that this meeting will be slightly shorter than the full council meeting, which was the last meeting I chaired. And I would like it to be shorter because I need to be out of here at 5 o'clock at the very latest. But Denise has agreed that if the meeting is overrunning, she'll take over. But I'm hoping we'll get it done in that time. I know what succinct speakers we've all got around the room. So if, yes.
It might feel slightly better to know that the Salisbury City Council meeting finished at 10:30.
But what time did it start?
It started at 6:30.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 12 hours. I'm never doing that again. Anyway, yes. Yeah, 10:30 is not a good time to end a meeting. Anyway, welcome everybody. Thank you for everyone who's here today. So if we get started on item 1, apologies, substitution, changes to membership. Tara, can you update us, please?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. So we've had apologies from Maria Hook. Is Jackie here?
Unfortunately, Jackie's given her apologies. She's not well.
And also we've had substitutions from Kim Marie Cleesbury, who's being substituted by Ross Hanning. And do you want me to do the membership changes?
Yes, please, yeah.
And the changes made to the membership of the committee at full council were that Ben Reid is now on the committee as a substitute, Mike Sankey is no longer on the committee, and Robert Smith has been added to the committee.
Yes, welcome, Robert. Very good to see you here. I mean, we have had some training, but just so you know, we do briefings before every Children's Select meeting, so we're all learning all the time. I was the lead member for 12 years and I still learn every day. So don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the same of everybody. Please ask questions because sometimes it's that question that actually is the key to what we're trying to understand. So don't ever worry that if you're not understanding something, please ask for clarification because that's good scrutiny. So thank you for that. Minutes of the previous meeting on pages 9 to 16 of the agenda. Is everyone happy for me to approve those minutes? Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest? Nope. No, that's good. Chairman's announcements. I don't have any. So that's keeping us on track. Do we have any public participation? No, it hasn't happened in 16 years that I've been in this room, but you never know. So we now move on to the main work of the council, which is, we start at item number 6, which is standard reports. And we start with the safety valve report on pages 17 to 24 of our agenda. So I invite Ben to come and give us an update, please, if you're happy to do that. Is there a space for Ben? Yeah. Thank you. Welcome. I'll hand over to you, Ben, and then obviously open it out to the floor to us who want to ask questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. This is the slightly shorter update report because we're between DFE monitoring reports. We send a quarterly monitoring report to the DFE, so this one doesn't contain that monitoring report, and so there isn't a huge amount to report in terms of updates. Things are continuing to move forward. There has been no significant improvement in the position, and we're continuing to look at what has caused our plan to go off track, and we're undertaking a strategic review of the plan to make sure that we understand what's causing the plan to go off track, whether that is a problem with the plan itself or a problem with the way the plan's being implemented, both or neither, and so that is quite a challenging piece of work in terms of just making sure that we get those answers right. Because if we start adjusting a plan that is working, then we'll be back to square one. So I think what I'm really trying to do is offer some reassurance that while this plan is continuing to look off track, we are doing everything we can to understand the reasons for that and to come up with ways to address that. And we're being challenged by all members, but particularly the Cabinet, in terms of where we can go further and faster to move this plan forward, and what steps we can take to ensure that we're getting our safety valve position back on track. The only other thing I will just update members on is that the reforms that we were hoping we would have seen by now, were due to be published in autumn by the government to the national SEND reforms. Those are expected to include significant changes to the funding mechanism for SEND support. They're expected to include changes to the way that support is delivered, while really focusing, as we already do in Wiltshire, on mainstream inclusion and on resource bases. But those have been delayed until early next year, the latest news report has said. And so while we are continuing to prepare ourselves for those to be published and for us to then implement them, there's no further clarity on what those are likely to contain, which is disappointing. But yeah, we remain, I think, cautiously optimistic that there will be, following that publication, that those reforms will continue to nudge us in a good direction, in terms of the support that we give the children and young people in Wiltshire, but also in terms of clarifying some of the funding arrangements around SEND as well. So I think I'll leave it there in terms of questions, Chair.
Thank you. Does the portfolio holder for SEND want to comment? Okay, fine. Any other directors want to comment at this stage?
Thanks, Chair. Catherine Davis, Director of Education and Skills. Just to reiterate what Ben was saying really about those paused SEND reforms nationally, we do think we're well placed in Wiltshire to respond to those. All of the strands of our SEND transformation work are focused on improving and enhancing mainstream inclusion and strengthening the local area partnership work. We know we, a year ago, had a very successful Ofsted CQC inspection that meant that we can be confident about the outcomes and experiences of children and young people with SEND in Wiltshire. What we need to do is respond to that challenge from Cabinet in terms of working faster and harder in terms of moving forward with those transformational pieces in order that we can continue to support our schools with strengthening their ordinarily available provision offer and making sure that mainstream inclusion in Wiltshire is excellent.
Okay, members of the committee, would you like to ask any questions? Jo.
Just a quick one, really. It does mention in the report that the concern that obviously the expectation there are SEND reforms coming, that actually that's accelerated people trying to come forward and get, potentially apply for EHCPs before there may be change. And actually the fact that's being kicked further down the road potentially is giving people more time to do that. It does also, mention demand is rising. We're seeing that nationally. So with the other safety valve local authorities that are involved at that, are they seeing that happening at the same level as us at the moment on those increases?
I don't know if they're seeing them at the same level, but they are all still seeing them. And there was a report, I think it was a report or a letter from the Director of Children's Services saying actually that this is a national thing, that every local authority is experiencing rise, and that those rises are broadly attributable to concerns about the reforms. Locally, what we are doing is we're about to put out our annual SEND survey, and that will go to parents, both the children with the HCPs, but also those with SEND support, and some of those questions are about the reforms and the concerns within. So that we can get a good understanding of that, and then we can be better prepared in terms of responding to those concerns, allaying those fears, and making sure that we're providing good information when the reforms are published.
The other question was, I'm conscious in one of the later reports where we look at educational performance outcomes, some of the positives in there actually were those with EHCPs and SEND support, which is a difficult message to give, isn't it? So I was just thinking whether there were positives in there about within mainstream or that we're able to pull out to give people confidence, because in some ways that kind of works. I mean, you wouldn't want the performance to be poor, but it works against the message we're trying to give.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Actually, we know that performance and outcomes in terms of attainment and progress for children with SEND in Wiltshire is strong, as is attendance. There's some excellent good news stories there, and I think we have been clear all the way through that the financial sustainability work that we're doing will absolutely not compromise anything to do with those good outcomes that we already see. But I think you've got a very valid point there about making sure that we are highlighting to families how positive those overall outcomes are as a comparator. I think that's a good point. Yeah, as part of that piece of supporting families' confidence and providing that reassurance.
I've got Dom next.
Thank you. Joe actually took the words out of my mouth, so I'll amend my question slightly, which is if we think about the financial pressures on schools, we look to something like the F40, bringing authorities and schools together. Does something exist that allows that sharing of knowledge and sort of uniting of a front to with regards to safety valves specifically, or do we rely on central government DFE type consultations?
So there are a couple of safety valve council networks that we are part of. A couple that are facilitated by external consultancy firms. We don't pay for those; they put them on to advertise their wares, and we politely ignore the advert and chat amongst ourselves. And then there's also the LGA have got a safety valve network group as well, which has been quite active in terms of lobbying around this and making sure that the LGA messages that go to government are aligned with the kinds of things that we are experiencing and other safety valve councils are experiencing as well.
I suppose the other thing I would add there is obviously Wiltshire is part of the F40 group as well, the 40 lowest funded local authorities in terms of schools funding in England, and we continue to work with and through the F40 to support that understanding about how the funding for Wiltshire schools also has an impact in terms of the high needs block position that we're in and the challenges, the very real challenges for our schools in terms of finance.
Thank you. I've got John, then Mike. Mike, can you switch your mic off?
Yeah, just a quick point coming back to the comparison between other educational authorities. Do the current circumstances, can they be measured against an authority with similar characteristics, statistical data and so forth? Because sometimes that's more helpful than just looking at national trends. If there is one, do you have time to actually communicate with them about the issues that they're facing and how the changes are affecting them?
We've had conversations with other authorities that are similar to us. I mean, we've had quite a few conversations with Norfolk, as an example, who are another safety valve council. They're not actually one of our statistical neighbours, but they're another large rural authority, and getting to understand how they're tackling their challenges has been really helpful. They are 2 years ahead of us, I think, in terms of their safety valve arrangements, but are still continuing to experience the same pressures that we're experiencing. And I think for a while felt like they were getting on top of it, and it's sort of happening again. And it's, there's some real similarities there in terms of our shared experiences. East Sussex is another one that we've spoken to as well. So there are definitely conversations happening. We continue to have quite long conversations, extensive conversations, with Dorset, who are a statistical neighbour and a safety valve council. So yeah, there's a lot of sharing in terms of knowledge and understanding and what's working or not working in other authorities as well.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the school's view or attitude was when it comes to differentiating between the need for mainstream education and the HCP. Is the balance decided on financial basis, or is it more in favour of the child's needs?
I mean, we can't. I wouldn't like to guess what drives schools to apply for EHCPs, but we just know that locally we apply the same standard. If a child, we have to apply that legal test. If a child might have SEND needs and might require an EHCP, then they should have an assessment. And if they're assessed to require an EHCP at the end of that, they will receive one. So we apply those same standards, whether it's a parental request or a school request, or a request from the child themselves.
John.
Thank you, Chair. Members may like to know, excuse me, that we're in the middle of a consultation period, which the local authority are doing with all schools, both maintained and academies, to look at the ways of the High Needs budget and transfer of money in that connection. And I'd like to pay tribute to Ben's colleague, Liz Williams, who gave the Wiltshire Governors Network a really good webinar on Wednesday evening. And I'd like to just mention that and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose, sorry, any other questions from members? Oh, yeah. Do you want to come up now? Thank you.
Yeah, John just mentioned that I was at school governors meeting last night where this came up. Does the school support the environment of some extra money towards the send from the dedicated schools grant? And I thought all the time, what if everybody said no? You know what? I can't imagine they would. I mean, I became first aware of the safety valve at the schools forum, and I just so that's a bit of a silly question. It wasn't really a question, but I'd just like to say to officers, you're up against a mountain here. I just don't know how, without really strong intervention from the government, we're not going to get through it.
No, I think, and just to respond seriously to what you felt was a silly question, the consultation's out there and is genuine. And if schools came back and said they didn't want any money transferred from the schools block to the High Needs block, then that will be the recommendation that then would go forward to cabinet. The consultation specifically is about whether or not to transfer more than 0.5% from the schools block to the High Needs block. And last year what happened was that the schools said, actually, we don't want to transfer more than 0.5%. We'd like to transfer as much as we can without impacting our school's budget, which I think was about 0.3-ish%. And that is then what Cabinet voted to implement. So we take that consultation very seriously, because we take that partnership with schools very seriously, and would want to make sure that carries on.
Did you want to come in now?
Sorry about that. Yes, I just wanted to say that, obviously it's very disappointing about the fact that there's been another delay in the white papers coming out. And obviously that will have a bit of an impact as to how quickly things are being able to be implemented. However, what I would like to say is I went to an F40 campaign meeting in Parliament as part of my job, not my role. And I did meet with F40 campaigners. And one of the things that was brought up was actually a lot of praise about Wiltshire and how people are actually looking at how we're doing things, despite the fact of those delays and despite the fact that we are one of the lowest funded in the country. And I just wanted to say, I think that is actually something very positive to take away from this, is that what we are putting in place for going forward, obviously there are always improvements that we are making, but going forward, we do seem to be doing the right thing, and other people are looking to us as to how we're actually dealing with things and how we're progressing with it. So I just want to say that I think that's a really positive thing to bring out this.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to talk about how are we doing on stopping EHCPs, but also how are we doing on saying no? And I suppose, part of that is a cultural side. I mean, we talked about giving parents confidence that they don't need an AHCP. And I think that's what I was thinking when I was sitting in that briefing on AP, was if we can crack AP so well, why have we got so many children on EHCPs? And why can't we just offer that instead?
So I think your note in the data dashboard that came around, that the rate at which we're saying no has gone up, and that is giving confidence to us, because we're more aligned now to where our statistical neighbours are in terms of the percentage of times that they say no, and more aligned to national averages, which I think puts us in a more comfortable place, because we were at one stage saying no almost half as much as equivalent authorities. And while we're doing that, I again want to emphasise that point about the threshold. So where the threshold is met, we will still make sure that child receives an assessment and the appropriate support. But we can be a bit more confident now that the decisions that we're making are the right decisions, both to say yes and to say no. and that feels like a much more comfortable place. To switch on to the second part of your question, which was around the kind of culture change. Over time, what we'd like to see is that there is enough confidence in the inclusion support within Wiltshire that actually we see fewer requests come in, and that no to assess and no to issue rate will start to come down again, because the right requests are coming in, rather than continuing to have this large group of requests which we think are perhaps premature and driven by concerns about national reform. So I think it's quite a complex picture, because we want that figure to go up and down, and it plays off against other bits of data, the number of EHCNA requests and so on. But it starts to paint a more positive picture, a picture of us being more in control, I think, of the direction of travel, and that some of the measures that we're putting in place are starting to work, even though we're not yet seeing that in the financial data.
And what about the AP provision? Why can't we use that more rather than in the HCP?
I think there are, we've just done the briefing on alternative provision in Wiltshire, and we recognise that there's a strength there in terms of the offer that we have locally. We can absolutely enjoy and build on those benefits that we have in terms of a strong quality assured AP offer in Wiltshire. However, the real solution here, Chair, will be about making sure that our mainstream schools have got a really strong ordinarily available provision offer that is well communicated with parents and with families, so that they feel confident that what the school can offer is sufficient to meet their child's needs, and it doesn't have to be stuff that is different to and additional from, that has to be around off-site direction. What's really important is that we're keeping our children in their local schools, and that the quality of the offer there is as high as it possibly can be, rather than focusing on the solution being kind of out there in AP. The solution should be right there, grounded in every community school.
Which is where the resource bases hopefully are having an effect, because we set those up. Okay, thank you. Anyone else got any comments or questions they want to make? No. So we note the report we're meant to do, and I know it's tough coming back every time, but I still think it's the most important thing affecting this council. So if we're not scrutinising it, it would be wrong. So thank you very much for that, and we will keep on it. But I sit on one of the LGA's Children and Young People's Committee, and we're getting a briefing on this, on the changes that haven't happened via the white paper, but apparently I'm getting an inside briefing at some point. So if there's anything I can share, I will let you know, because it was part of a big agenda, and I was saying, well, how are you going to brief us on this if it's not happening? And I was told there's still stuff they can tell us. So if there's anything of use, I will obviously share it with everyone. Brilliant, thank you for that. So we now move on to item 6B, which is the school attendance update. John, I understand you're going to give us a brief outline of the key points.
Never had to do that before. Thanks, Chair. Apologies. Good afternoon, everybody. So I will just briefly summarise, as I'm aware that you will have read this in advance. So this is the update in relation to school attendance. Initially, the report talks to the summary in relation to implementation of the statutory guidance working together to improve school attendance. We have had sign-off effectively from our DfE attendance advisor, although that's not a formal process. They've made contact with us to say they're really comfortable with the excellent existing practice that is in place in Wiltshire, and they don't need to provide us with any ongoing monitoring or support. Obviously, they're still available should we need it, but that was really positive. A few of the changes in terms of our continued work to make sure the data is rich that we receive. The DfE have done a lot of work in relation to WANDS data, which has been helpful. So we've been utilising additional offers available, cross-borders attendance, for example. But in terms of our own data that we collate and collect in addition to what we need to statutorily, in terms of group call, we're now at 99% engagement from schools, so only two schools are not sharing their data with us, which means that we basically have a full data set.
Are we allowed to know which those two are?
you are, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I've written to them really recently. So
Okay.
they're 2 small primaries, and I think they're in the process of coordinating that. So I think we're basically there. We have, of course, the targeted support meetings that Education Welfare complete with schools, which is in the statutory guidance. We've set ourselves a really ambitious target of 100% of all schools receiving a TSM in the autumn term, which far exceeds the statutory expectation. At the point of writing, we were already at 58% of schools completed, 151 of 261, because it includes our independent schools. And we are working towards that very ambitious target, and that will no doubt have a positive impact in terms of them being able to target further support for schools that still need it in advance of that autumn term. We've done a lot of work around the attendance strategy. I've been to various sessions to deliver co-production sessions in relation to our attendance strategy for 2026, which is on course to be published in late January. So those stakeholder engagement sessions have been really helpful to understand the current picture, the current barriers, and make sure that our emerging themes, if we've identified them at this point in time, are on track and on point. As part of the strategy plans, we already have 3 roles that have been recruited to or are in the process of being recruited to. So we have the attendance re-engagement officers. I think I've mentioned previously around these roles, the arrows that will be supporting emotional barriers to school attendance concerns for children with identified SEND needs. We have the virtual school officer for extended duties, so supporting children with a social worker. They were appointed in September, an ex-primary head teacher from within Wiltshire, incredibly experienced, and that is already adding value in terms of the attendance of our children with a social worker. And hopefully to come on board at the end of January, the EBSA mentors, who will also, similarly to the attendance engagement officers, provide support around emotional barriers to school attendance, albeit more at the severe absence stage, below 50% attendance. In terms of the data, we've made changes to the report on the back of the recommendation previously around 5-year trend. We can see that from the DfE absence published data in the autumn term, we are still 0.1 percentage points above national and significantly above regional. For overall attendance, equally we're above for primary and special schools, and our secondary attendance is slightly below national 0.4 percentage points, 0.4 percentage points, but still above regional comparators. It should be said that at the point of writing, the day later, the DfE released the autumn and spring term data, which is going to be annoying. So I will share that in the next update, but the trends are very similar and we continue to show positive outcomes. In terms of persistent absence below 50%, we are better than all comparators. Severe absence below 50% attendance, below 90, I should have said for persistent. So severe absence below 50%, we are higher than the national average by 0.3 percentage points, but still better than the regional comparators. If we look at the live data through 1 for this academic year, as of the 23rd of October, again, similar picture, we are better than national and Southwest comparators for overall attendance, primary and special, but slightly behind in terms of secondary. I've also included a breakdown of codes, so you can see a trend over time for Wiltshire for specific code breakdowns. The only thing to flag there is that we are scrutinising heavily the temporary reduced timetable C2 code. That was a new code introduced from September 2024-25, last academic year. And that's enabling us to do some more detailed analysis because we receive information around reduced education plans, or REPs as we call them in Wiltshire, as opposed to part-time timetables, so we can do some useful comparison to make sure that all schools are appropriately sharing with us when a child young person is on a reduced education plan. Breakdown has been provided for different cohorts, and just to pull out some positives there, we can see some really positive trend data in relation to SEND support attendance, and also in relation to children in need and children at child protection compared to previous Wiltshire data. And that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Any questions from the panel? Jo?
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, there are some really positive figures in there, which is great to see. I've got one question around the secondary absence, which, you know, I know we all look at and go, quite scary, but that is a national picture. So I suppose my question is around, I don't know nationally whether there is an expectation as to whether we'll ever kind of get back to 95%, whether there is that expectation. And if so, do we have any view or feeling of whether that might be a 5 or 10 year kind of pathway? Because it certainly isn't going to be sort of a couple of years. So that's more of a generic question. And then the question more specifically, I suppose, to us is, severe absence always makes me wince, because I always look at that and I think my immediate thought is safeguarding. And I know that's not the case for everybody who's off for severe absence. So I'd just like to understand a bit more about how we look at that, really.
Yeah, and could you distinguish, please, as part of that question, sorry, the difference between persistent and severe absence?
Yeah, apologies, of course. And I did say that in the report, but I jumbled over my words. So persistent absence is below 90% attendance, and severe absence was a metric introduced more recently within the last 4 or 5 years for below 50% attendance. So all pupils who are severely absent are also persistently absent, but there's a separate metric to consider the very nature of the increased risk as has been identified. So to answer the first question, you're absolutely right that secondary attendance as a national trend is lower than primary attendance. That's always been the case. In terms of when that might return to pre-pandemic levels, it's very hard to quantify. There's so many factors at play there. We know that we're waiting for SEND reforms, Schools and Wellbeing Bill, and that's going to have an impact upon attendance expectations. What we do, however, know is that yesterday the DfE released a fairly bombshell update which talks to the attendance baseline improvement expectations, or ABI, and all schools through their Similar Schools report, which is effectively a report that's regularly provided from the DfE to schools around other schools' performance that have similar demographics, geography, pupil needs, deprivation, schools that are performing better than that school, and where that school sits in terms of the national picture, which is incredibly helpful to be able to challenge and support schools appropriately, where they're saying, yes, our attendance is low, but look at these factors. We're in a really rural part of Wiltshire, there's transport issues, etc. So we can really then start to better challenge schools. And what the ABI does, the attendance baseline improvement expectation, is it sets school an incremental target each academic year. So personally, I'm in favour of it, and we've been talking to in our attendance strategy the importance of attendance targets baseline by school, and the DfE have gone and done it for us, which is great. So that's going to really help in terms of driving that secondary improvement. And again, LA officers who link with schools from a variety of different approaches, SEND, school improvement, education welfare service, behaviour support, whoever it may be, will be able to have access to that information and then really support that one council, everyone's responsibility approach in terms of improving outcomes. But the secondary piece has a lot more work to do to reach pre-pandemic levels. And your other question I've forgotten because it feels like so long ago. Could you just...
The severe absence.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. You're absolutely right that severe absence and absence itself has been identified through a range of research as being a significant risk factor then for other concerns, exploitation, for example, criminal county lines, whatever it may be. So there's certainly a cohort that we have more significant oversight of. There's so many methods by which we might achieve that. So from a local authority perspective in terms of providing provision, we've got the Section 19 panel, which meets every week, multi-agency, and will review cases, nearly always cases that are young people who are severely absent. We've got our children absent from education cafe process. There's a range of different subgroups that meet every week. One for SEND, one for children with a social worker, one for children missing education, and multiple other examples. And we're adding new ones in, young carers. So that's with the aim of making sure that we are catching as many of these young people as possible. Equally, the targeted support meetings with Education Welfare Service will pick up those children that are severely absent as a priority before we go on to persistently absent and other cases. And that's for the reason you've shared, which is making sure that the school are meeting their duties in relation to safeguarding, and that we have good coverage and understanding around where those young people are.
Brilliant. John.
Yeah, a couple of factors in play here. Obviously, pandemic. And I think a big factor, which you can't really legislate for, is that you've got parents working from home significantly longer periods of time, often on a Monday and a Friday, which is notoriously the time when people take time off anyway. So that's one thing. But am I right in saying that the persistent absentees will considerably skew the figures in the wrong direction? And is there any way of getting underneath that data in terms of what are the different reasons, the most common reasons for persistent absence? Is some of it to do with chronic illnesses? how much of it is to do with, just refusal to attend. And if we can get some handle on that, maybe, I don't know, maybe we could focus on particular areas where you might get a quick win in terms of additional support.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So you're absolutely right. Persistent absence and those young people that are persistently absent will impact on a school's overall attendance percentage. There is, through the Similar Schools report, the DfE have provided schools now with a really rich data set that gives them some of that analysis. So it will show them which cohorts are at greater risk of persistent absence or demonstrating higher rates of persistent absence, and that enables schools to better target. And it will say things like your Year 7 SEND support cohort are the highest rate in terms of persistent absence, so they can be really strategic in terms of their plans to address that that concern. So that is definitely helping, and the more we're able to ensure schools are using that Similar Schools report effectively through our targeted support meetings, the better impact we will see in terms of outcomes there. On the piece around there's multiple reasons and barriers, working together in terms of statutory guidance talks very clearly about the expectation on schools to understand the barriers, to listen to parents and carers, and all schools are expected to have a clear plan in place where a young person is at risk of persistent absence, so really it's kind of 93, 92% below, and persistently absent as well as down to severe absence. So again, there's an expectation on schools to be able to demonstrate that they're listening to the views of parents, they're understanding those barriers, whether they relate to SEND needs, mental health, physical illness, whatever it might be, and there's a plan in place to support.
Thank you. And of course, having discussed alternative provision, the long-term impact of persistent attendance will put an extra burden on alternative provision too. So the attendance is, very much an important part of that process.
Thank you. Any other comments? Stuart, do you want to say anything as portfolio holder for education? Thank you very much. Good. Okay, thank you for that report. Oh, sorry. Julie.
I just wanted to compliment you on writing such a comprehensive report because it was really reassuring. Yeah, thank you very much.
It is, and it's definitely in the right direction. And yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm just looking at the loop of, the graph of during the pandemic, and it is going down, but it'll be interesting to see if it ever. And I think that, as you say, parents working from home, in the olden days, if you look slightly sick, your parents would say, go to school, but now they can say, okay, just stay in the house, it'll be easier. So I imagine that's harder in some respects. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's school attendance. So the Department for Education updates, is there an officer who wants to present this, or is this? Okay, so are there any comments anyone wanted to make on this report? I just wanted to say, I think I really like the way now that we refer to the change and then what's Wiltshire's position in that. I think that's really helpful for us as members to see that. So we could thank the report writer for that. I'm very grateful for that. Anyone got any comments on anything? I mean, I think that the main thing that we're all waiting for is this white paper, because it's so fundamental. And I don't doubt the difficulty for the DfE to try and sort out what they're going to do about SEND, but it will be interesting to see. But as I said, if I get anything else from my LGA links, I will certainly keep people updated. Okay, so we note that report. So we move on to item 7, which is Education Performance Outcomes Annual Report. Stuart, do you want to come up to the table anyway, just so you're here? I just feel aware that as a portfolio holder, well, no, and you, sorry, but with responsibility for education, you should be at the table. But I will hand over to Louise and Catherine to introduce the report.
Thanks, Chair. So I welcome Louise as Head of School Effectiveness, who's going to present the report. But I just wanted to start off by saying, obviously, this is a very comprehensive data report. But I did want to point out the fact that the changes that we've made to how this report is presented directly align to the requests that came from the rapid scrutiny group that met to look at this data. So it is very comprehensive, but it is in line with what was asked for. However, if there are kind of further points of reflection that you have following seeing the kind of the length of that report, we're happy to hear that. Louise is going to talk about exceptions only in this meeting, and those exceptions in the data will be around strengths and also areas for improvement. It's really important we focus on the strengths, the practice that are out there, as well as those areas for improvement. And we can talk a little bit about the actions that we're taking as well, where we acknowledge those areas for improvement that are required. So that's my preamble, really, is just a reminder that the reason the structure of this report has changed is as a result
So
of
what you were
rapid
really
scrutiny.
saying is be careful what you ask for.
Perhaps.
That's absolutely fine. Yes, I understand. Right.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. It is a weighty document, but there we go. So I'm just going to look at the report I put alongside it. So as Catherine said, I'll just highlight the key strengths and then talk about what we're doing to support schools to improve this. So overall key strengths really from that whole data bit would be firstly for our good level of development. So for children in that first year of school, we at Wiltshire consistently perform above national in terms of outcomes for all learners there. And actually that gap has continued to increase. So it's increased by 2% this year, which is a more accelerated pace than national, so we're really pleased with that. I think although outcomes at Key Stage 2 remain below national outcomes, which is obviously not something we're comfortable with, there has been a more accelerated increase in terms of maths, grammar, punctuation, spelling, and then that combined reading, writing, maths score, which is what they call secondary readiness. So children reaching the expected standard for across all three measures at the end of Key Stage 2 has improved more quickly than we've seen in the past. So that is a sort of something that we are pleased with, although obviously not complacent about, and also at the highest standard as well. And that is the case for most pupil groups. So, you know, it's an extensive report which broke down into all sorts of pupil groups, but almost all pupil groups actually, with the exception of those with English as an additional language and those of minority ethnic status, have also improved their outcomes from last academic year. So it's not where we want it to be, but there are improvements. So, you know, we're really pleased with that. And then across all primary assessment areas, as we've already said, learners in Wiltshire that either have it in the HCP or at SEND support have performed better than national averages. So, you know, we are really pleased with that. So sort of key areas for improvement, and we can unpick it in all sorts of detail, but overarching ones would be the proportion achieving phonics standard at year 1 has decreased from last academic year, and that puts us 1% below national, which again we're not comfortable with, because that's an area where we have sat against national, so that's something to focus on. As I've already said, all outcomes at Key Stage 2 are below national averages for all pupils, so that is absolutely something that we need to focus on. For pupil achievement across all primary areas, those at the different characteristics again are below national averages in most assessment areas. And as we know, key golden thread for all our work is those disadvantaged learners, those that are eligible for free school meals or have ever been. And despite there have been some really positive gains compared to last year's outcomes, those gaps still remain large against national outcomes. And equally so for those with English as an additional language and those from a minority ethnic group. So I won't go through all the detail of the particular primary assessment areas, because you've got that, and obviously you've got the detailed data report. I'll go to the bottom where I've summarised some of the sort of main areas that we've put on to kind of improve outcomes, really. So first of all, there is a programme which is not just about school effectiveness. This is education and skills, and a directorate-wide and a national programme, which is the Best Start in Life programme, and that is about particularly part of that is about raising outcomes for good level of development for all pupils, but particularly for disadvantaged learners. And we have our own target within Wiltshire. All schools are expected to, for 75% of learners, to achieve a good level of development by the end of 2028. And for our disadvantaged learners within Wiltshire, they're saying 58.1%, which equates to something like a 9% rise. So we've started that strategy already. With school effectiveness and early years, we have identified all our schools with the highest number of disadvantaged learners and those that have got 60% or less GLD from last year or over a trend, and have offered direct teacher support to improve outcomes, and that letter's gone out, and we've had really good uptake already. Equally, as part of that strategy, we've put together a working group of head teachers to be able to identify what the barriers are, and we'll be employing a school improvement advisor who can work with head teachers to be able to focus on how they improve outcomes for and the provision for that reception year within schools. Math strategy, that's something that's come through the Wiltshire Learning Alliance. It's developed but not in place yet. But we do have a plan to roll that out. So that will be focusing on, again, leadership and mathematic curriculum, because we know the barriers there are many schemes that schools use, but they're not using them in the adaptive way they need to meet the needs of all learners. And therefore, it's about improving that sort of in the classroom support there. We have a teaching toolkit, which is very much focused on quality of teaching and learning. If we look at our key stage 2 outcomes overall, that's not just about subject specific, that's about in the classroom, good quality teaching and learning. So it's a year-long programme. We have, I think it's about 30 schools on it at the moment. And it is an intensive programme where leaders are focusing on what good quality teaching and learning looks like, and then teachers come in the afternoon to also receive that input, and then there's kind of in-between gap tasks to focus on how that is developed across the year. So our school improvement framework, as a local authority, or as a school improvement team, we have our biggest influence over our maintained schools. Remember, we've always got that split between that is where we have our influence. We have little influence across academies. They can buy in our support and our CPD, but that's up to them. So this is very much focused on our maintained schools. So we have a universal targeted intensive support that we use through school improvement advisors. Things like the teaching toolkit is offered free of charge for all of our maintained schools, and we've got really good uptake on that. Our golden thread through all of that is we look at whatever work we do through the lens of disadvantage. So whether we're doing learning walks, whether we're looking at books in maths and advising what's working well or not, we always have disadvantaged learners books, and we always focus on them to look at if they're getting the best, then we know everybody else will also do well. So we try and, whenever we work through that school improvement framework, but all our work, we have that lens. We've got our mainstream inclusion support advisors who are working with individual schools and SENCOs. SENCOs are absolutely intrinsic in schools about not just, looking at individual pupils with EHCPs, but their role is about the needs of the school and how are we using our the money within the school and the budget to provide great inclusive practice to support all learners' needs, regardless of whether they have an EHCP or not. And so that they've been doing some really good work around that. Times table, there's within your data, you'll see some the year 4 times table report tests that they do now. They're not a statutory thing, but most schools report on them now. So we have some times table networks, and we have targeted all schools where outcomes were poor. And they come together termly to sort of focus on best practice and think about how they can improve outcomes around that. As part of, we've got the Leading Successful Schools programme, which is about leadership. Of course, good leaders create good outcomes for pupils, and that's it. So that's a very successful but leadership programme that continues. Then outside of what we have within our Education Skills Directorate, the Maths Hubs, which are Mobius Maths and DFE, they provide national programmes that are funded for schools to improve maths and particularly phonics and reading, and they're free training. So we do work with them to suggest schools that they work with. We also work with them to make sure that they're targeting the right schools, and if schools are not engaging with that, how can we support them to engage with that, and to encourage schools to take that offer up. It's brilliant training, but we need people to take that up. We also are on our second year of Cracking Communication, which is focused on pupils in the early years, so at GLD, and also phonics, so year 1 as well. And that's all about communication, phonics, and that provision, because actually language, if they can crack language, then that's the great foundation for as they go up through the years. We're on our second tranche now. It is we've got the Education Endowment Fund that support that too, and it's a nationally recognised programme now. We've got the DFE really interested in it, and we have 35 schools taking that up. And early indicators of the first tranche that went through was that it had a really significant impact on outcomes for GLD and phonics. But it was about 12 schools, so we're waiting to sort of see the outcomes for this lot. So curriculum networks, we've got a writing project as well. You can see there. Year of Reading starts in January. It's a national thing, so we'll be encouraging. We've got a bit of a project going on there to encourage all our schools to engage with that. And the bit that I didn't put on there, but you'll have heard about before, thinking about our disadvantaged learners again, is we do have our One Council plan, and that is very much focused on how we all as a council, certainly within our Children's Directorate, think about prioritising outcomes for them. So that was as quick as I could be, Laura. Sorry.
Thank you. I know there's a lot of information to take in. Yes. So who'd like to ask a question? Jo?
Sorry. Thank you very much, Louise. And the first thing I think I would say is, numbers like this are always the numbers that come through, and I don't underestimate the extraordinary work that our schools and staff here at Council, at schools across maintained and academies and early years settings put in to try and achieve the best for our young people. And as we said earlier, EHCP results are reasonably good, as are EYFS. So I have a question around the EYFS, where we are getting good results. I suppose my question is, how do we stop that then not continuing as that transitions forward? And I appreciate you've just been through a lot of individual interventions, but I suppose my question, so I'm going to go around the houses, my question around that, how do we stop that? Is there more still that we need to do of force, is the wrong word, encouraging our maintained and MATs to really be working together on that school-led improvement with council supporting them. And I'm conscious we've got funding issues, F40, I think we're all very aware of that. Disadvantaged learners, I can't help but be disappointed where we are. And that is partly as well, I know we've got disadvantaged learner strategy and we've been talking through that, but it still kind of feels like we're still kind of going through really quite thick mud to move that forward. So I suppose I'm looking for some encouragement and give me some confidence that that is actually going to change into a positive.
Okay, so if I take your question was that that those children at GLD that continues in a positive light, yeah, because it doesn't in terms of that. So that is always about quality of education, which is why those programmes that I've talked about and leadership are very much focused on exactly that, and getting uptake on that in terms of pedagogy and strategies and supporting leaders to be able to do exactly that, continue that as they go through the years is really important. There are curriculum challenges around that. So we've got a change of framework now in terms of Ofsted, but if you think of an early years curriculum is very play-based, provision, practically led, and there are different pedagogical ways of doing that as you go through the different key stages. Often things can become too tabletop and desk-led, which when children are not necessarily, particularly post-COVID, ready to do that. So that's why we've got that focus of quality of teaching and learning, empowering leaders to think about what are the needs of the learners, how do you adapt a curriculum that could, if you're not careful, be too rigid, to make sure that it is adapted to the needs of the learners. And that's why, unapologetically, we've got the teaching toolkit and the leadership strategy, which is very much about empowering our leaders to feel confident at doing that, because they need to be doing that. So that's kind of that bit, without going, you know, spouting educational theory forever and boring you all. The disadvantaged learners bit. I mean, yes, of course, we're all really. That's why I'm saying we have seen some green shoots though. I did a whole grid thing, and actually they have improved, although they're behind, of course, still. They have shown more accelerated progress this academic year than they have in the over a number of years, and that is positive. It's very difficult because what happens is, if you're improving the quality of learning within a classroom, those children that are not disadvantaged tend to improve more quickly than those not. And you know, you end up with this. It still is, and that's not an excuse. That is the research. But we like to take that as a positive. And we will continue to focus on that. We had the Disadvantaged Learners Charter last year, which we know specifically for maintained schools, which is where we have our biggest influence. We didn't put that, we haven't split it in the data like that, just because that wasn't what was asked for. But we know that for our maintained schools, actually we have bigger gains in maintained schools than elsewhere. And we know that's an impact of that very intensive focus we had last year from school improvement advisors and other initiatives where we were constantly going in. Let's have a look. What's that? You know, and as I say, looking at books and that continues. We're not complacent in that though, because it is difficult. The new Ofsted framework really plays into our hands here, because it is absolutely front and centre through all 8 areas. Disadvantaged learners and other vulnerabilities are absolutely, you cannot get, the expected standard, let alone get to strong standard plus, without your disadvantaged learners and other groups achieving really well. And, we can do a session on that if you're interested in the Ofsted strategy, but, and the toolkit, but it is really good. That is front and centre. The previous inspection was much more about curriculum. Curriculum is still there, but this is much more about, as I said, quality of teaching, learning, and how vulnerable groups are doing. And so we know our leaders are really, they are not complacent about this at all. But this also, there's nothing like having it in an Ofsted toolkit to help them really keep it front and centre. So it is also continues to be part of our Virtual Learning Alliance priority, etc. But I hope that assures you to a bit, and we just have to keep on going on about it in terms of what we're doing with schools, training, support, intervention to help them feel empowered to improve those outcomes. Really,
I pick up on the last bit, Joe, where you asked about leverage with academies, and I think we know we benefit from really positive relationships with our academies in Wiltshire. However, it is absolutely true that we don't have the same leverage because we don't have the same statutory responsibilities around school improvement there. What has been really pleasing over the last year is the work we've done with the Regions Group from DFE, who've been bringing together all of the MAT CEOs, Louise and I from the local authority and diocesan representatives, and us coming round. We're literally calling them roundtable events where we're all working together. We're sharing our Disadvantaged Learner Charter. We're sharing the work we're doing. Equally, we had some CEOs going up to the north of England, visiting some schools in the north, bringing back learning around learners experiencing disadvantage back to Wiltshire. And I think anything that we can do to continue to sort of develop that work together is helpful.
Yeah, and so in the back of that, we've also, I forgot to put that in my report, we are doing the same with maintained schools. So we've approached the top 4 schools within the Southwest who have had the best outcomes for disadvantaged learners. We've got a whole group of head teachers going off to visit them during the next sort of couple of months, and they will do the same thing. They're going to bring back, part of that is they go and you know, they have a nice trip out and have a look at the learning, and we've worked those heads to kind of prime them in terms of what those visits will look like, and we will go alongside them and sort of, you know, talk that through, and then they will bring that back, share their learning with all our maintained school head teachers, put together action plans in terms of, so what are you going to take from that and put in place in your school, and then we will be able to obviously support that with our school improvement work to ensure that, you know, we can sort of see that it's gaining traction really. So yeah.
Okay, I've got John, then Denise.
I can appreciate what you're going through at the moment because it's always been thus. With the transition from early years to year one, it's an expectation which is quite high in terms of suddenly you're going to become an independent learner and engage in a much more structured curriculum. One of the questions that I'm quite interested to know, is there any information about how the impact of schools funding affects schools generally across the county to support pupils, disadvantaged pupils in particular, in year one and year two? That's one question. The other thing is, I may have missed it, but it's very much about attainment, and the judgments are about attainment. I'd be very interested to know if there's any data on progress through the phases, because that is where you really ascertain your information about the quality of teaching. And I think if you're focusing on the quality of teaching, I'm 100% behind that, because if you get that right, everything else follows. But I do feel there could be a funding issue, as well as a training issue in terms of the numbers of support staff that are there. I know that's the first thing to drop off a school budget when they have to make a reduction. So I'm concerned about that. I mean, I know the pay rises have not been funded, because that just takes a big, more of a proportion of the school budget. And I'm just wondering whether that's starting to have an impact too. But I'd be really interested to know if we've got some progress data, because I'm sure there are schools out there that are making really good progress through Key Stage 2, and that's not necessarily being given enough profile, because it's always, where are you at the end of each phase in terms of national expectations?
Yeah, and obviously, if I start on the progress one, we've got progress data is limited because of COVID. So obviously that was the bit we always looked at, because I absolutely agree with you. Progress is more important in terms of understanding, particularly for groups. But we have very limited data. But also that wasn't something that was asked for with the rapid scrutiny. So well, that's something we can put in, you know, and I can bring that back. You know, that's fine. So yeah, that's. But I did comment on, that's where I know that some of those groups have made more rapid progress, because I use the progress-based data to make that commentary. So, you know, although it's not within your data, when I'm talking about it in that report, that's where I know that, you know, I have used progress data to inform that, but we can add that into the actual numerical Bible or booklet that you've got for next time. That's fine. In terms of the impact on, I haven't got the data of that in terms of the impact of funding for EYFS and year ones in terms of staffing. I don't have that. What we do know is that for disadvantaged learners, every school has got pupil premium funding, and you know, that hasn't changed. That stays the same. You know, it's absolutely clear that the majority of it should be spent on quality of teaching, of learning, which includes training, which includes support inside the classroom, and that only a very small amount. And then the next section of it should be spent on intervention, and then the final kind of, it's not even a quadrant, is it? It's something like a fifth of it. It should be spent on, you know, things like uniform or trips. So, and that's what we absolutely would be supporting and talking to schools about in terms of their strategy. Certainly with our maintained schools, one of the key pieces of work that a school improvement advisor does before they ever go into the school in the September term and then into next term, because that's when schools are writing their new strategies, would be to really forensically look at that strategy. Is it focused on the right things? Does it match what the gaps are for that school's data? And then when I'm in the classroom, does that look, you know, so, you know, is it around, like you say, staff, resourcing, whatever it needs to be. So they would be doing that. But I haven't got any overlying data to know, is it impacting on particular year groups in terms of staffing? And I don't know how we would get that. But we do that kind of that forensic support and challenge around pupil premium strategy, pupil premium spend in schools, and is it then having the impact it needs to? Because obviously that's what we need, and you know, so that, I don't know if that answers your question, but it, you know, yeah.
John, can you use your mic, because it's fine.
What capacity does the school improvement team have to, having identified areas for improvement, to actually deliver that appropriate level of training? I mean, it's just numbers now. How many school improvement staff do you have?
I've got 15 school improvement advisors, which is equivalent of 5.4 full-time equivalent, plus 3 regional leads and myself. But actually, our capacity is really good. I've just done a big exercise on that, actually, and we have plenty of capacity. And it enables us to be flexible. There's a core offer, which I can send round our school improvement framework that sort of identifies all of that. But each school gets a minimum of 3 whole days, but it's way more than that because they get hub work, they get training, and they're very good at where schools need additional extra intensive support. They've got plenty of capacity to pick that up. So I'm not concerned about capacity, actually.
And in terms of individual schools, the categories have changed now for what deemed to be failing schools. Used to be the case that if a school was in difficulties, there was an additional funding allocation for training and support during the process while the school's under closer scrutiny. Is that still in place?
For us internally, are you talking about if they are actually being through Ofsted and they go to special measures, or no, there isn't now, but there are RISE teams. Well, I say there isn't, except there is, but it's just doesn't come to the local authority. So there are the RISE, which is the Regional Improvement, is that what it is? What's it called? School evaluation teams, yeah. And they are focused on, so what happens is if a school is a coasting, so double RI or special measures, etc., then they will be eligible for RISE intervention. So that means they come in, they do an assessment, they decide if they're a maintained school, they decide whether the work that we're doing is driving improvement. So we've got a number of schools in this case, and actually most of them have been deemed as being that we are doing, we can carry on doing that work. And the same for academies. If they feel that improvement is not rapid enough, then they can put funding in, which basically means that another academy, they'll find another responsible body, is what they call it, who will then do that intervention. Sorry, it's yeah, what is it, Catherine? Sorry, regional. She's just reminding. Regional Improvement and Standards and Excellence teams. Thank you, Catherine. Sorry, she's just reminding me of the stand. So it's not direct funding as it was, as in here we are, here's a pot of cash. It is this. They will do a needs analysis and then they will fund that accordingly, in terms of putting in support or saying, or they don't put in support and we carry on doing what we're doing. Yeah.
Okay, Denise.
Yeah. Actually, John has actually gave the same question that I was really going to, but I just really want to go back just on the funding. We know that schools are obviously great funding. It is under immense pressure, and we know that each classroom has got to have a fully qualified teacher in that classroom. But where the first cuts are made are often to that support in that classroom. And I'd imagine 99% of teachers will say how much they value that extra support they get, whether it's taking children out of the classroom to do additional maths, reading, whatever. It's huge. And as somebody who worked in a setting and dealt with the budget, everything else really, salaries take up a huge percentage of your budget. And you can't do without that teacher. But unfortunately, you can make cuts to those contracts for teaching assistants and that extra support. And I'm just wondering what you're getting back from schools. I know you've spoken very much about the pupil premium, and I can vouch for that. I think nearly all our pupil premium, the setting I was at, went to those additional support, but it still wasn't enough. And that is my greatest concern, that really you've got those 30 children in a class, those children with additional needs, and that support staff who are not really well paid. They're not there. I think that's something that really ought to be closely looked at. And I know it's a funding issue, and that's not your fault, but I do think that there could be more done.
Yeah, I mean, of course, yeah, you're absolutely right. So where schools have funding pressures, they of course have to look at their budget, and you're right, support staff will be where often it is. However, research is really clear, and it has been really clear for many, many, many years, that actually the thing that makes the biggest difference for any pupil in terms of outcomes is a teacher and good quality first teaching. So there's a really old piece of research that the Education Endowment Fund puts around, and a child who works with a teacher who is disadvantaged will make something like 90% progress, compared to if they work with a teaching assistant on the same focus, they'll only make something like 30% progress. The difference that a teacher makes in the classroom, and it's nothing to do with pupil numbers, the research is very clear about that. Pupil numbers in a classroom makes no difference to pupil outcomes. The biggest difference in terms of pupil progress and children doing really well in terms of outcomes is having a really good teacher. And actually, the research is really clear that the worst thing you can do for a pupil who is suffering, who is education disadvantaged and needs to make rapid progress, is take them away from that teacher and put them with a less qualified teacher. The best thing you can do is give your most educationally disadvantaged pupils access to a really good quality teacher, because actually children who haven't got those will do pretty well anyway, and that is really clear in terms of the research, and it always has been. Now that's definitely not to say that are to do any disservice to our support staff, because you're absolutely right, they're integral to the working of school in terms of well-being, work-life balance, just the work in the classroom. They bring huge value, so I would never want anyone to think we're doing that. But the research is really clear. If you want your disadvantaged learners to make rapid progress, you give them access to a teacher way more than you give them access to a teaching assistant. And that's really, really clear. So I know what you're saying, but that's where we work with leaders to think about the best way to use their money.
Okay, thank you for that. So I just want to make a point. Interesting, your executive summary said it's a mixed picture. And I want to thank you very much for this report, particularly the full data report. And I'm looking at, it's not numbered, but I'm looking at starting at education performance summary, 1.1 summary, all pupils. If you then scroll through all those, and I'm thinking with my safeguarding hat on, if I saw a report like this with this many reds on it, I'd be really worried. And I'm looking and seeing some of the arrows are going in the right direction, but most things are red. And I worry that a report says that it's a mixed picture, because I don't think it's mixed. I think it's to me, it remains worrying. It always worried me when I was lead member, and it remains worrying. There is always a lot of activity. I see it happening. I know we've got all our support staff in. I can see it, and yet we're still on red. And I don't know whether Stuart wants to answer that, or Catherine as Director of Children's Services, but I remain concerned.
So yes, we absolutely acknowledge there is still work to do. The Key Stage 2 outcomes overall are not something that we are satisfied with, and the disadvantaged learner outcomes continue to be a real priority. But I have to reflect on exactly what Louise said about faster progress than national being made in Wiltshire last year. For those disadvantaged learner groups, and that is really significant. I think it is fair to say it's a mixed picture. I think the biggest challenge for us remains the mixed landscape that we have, and how we ensure that where we have common themes for improvement, Key Stage 2 or GLD outcomes for early years, for example, or phonics across the piece, that we are making sure that we are, of course, continuing to do all the things that we need to do with our maintained schools, but that we're also working as part of that wider education partnership in Wiltshire with our academy colleagues. And I think the more recent developments we've seen in that space, where we are coming together as a group, not just talking about logistics, but actually talking about teaching and learning as Director of Education, Head of School Improvement, MAT CEOs, diocesan education leads, that feels new and different. And that feels extremely positive in terms of consistency, improving consistency of approach around these school improvement priorities. and I'm really, really heartened at when we specifically look at the maintained schools data outcomes from the last year, seeing how some of those very focused projects like Cracking Communication had made such a significant difference in the outcomes for the children in those schools. What we need to see is that uniformly across all schools in Wiltshire. Equally, there are some of our academy schools that have got some excellent performance. We need to make sure we are learning from each other and making sure that excellent practice that sits in different spaces is shared and isn't just siloed into one setting. Stuart, do you want to comment?
I don't really have much to add, except that you know, I think it's the officers are focusing on the things that will make the most effect on these figures to improve things. But you're right, and anywhere where we're seeing reds, we need to be focusing attention on that.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you. It's great. I mean, it's such a helpful report. It's brilliant. It's much from a very visual person. This helps me enormously, and I think, as we said, it's trends that matter, but ultimately it's outcomes. Yeah. And you know, I know we're ambitious, but we've got to keep going. So thank you. So looking as though I'm not reading this, I want to note the Education Performance Outcomes Annual Report for 24-25. To request that data is provided on progress as well as attainment, and then to receive a copy of the School Improvement Framework if possible. Is everyone happy with that? Yeah. Thank you very much. That was a really good discussion. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so move on to item 8, which is the Safeguarding Vulnerable People Partnership Report 24-25. So the Safeguarding Vulnerable Partnership has an all-age remit, and there is a link to the full annual report in the introductory report on page 129 of the agenda. However, the focus of the presentation provided relates to children and young people, so I welcome Richard to come and present it. Nice to see you, Richard, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you.
Richard, do you want to just introduce your job title as well?
Yes, certainly. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Richard Harris. I'm the Senior and Children's Partnership Lead for the Safeguarding Vulnerable People Partnership.
It's in front of me, but not in front of you, so no, it's not. Just don't ask me to sort it. Oh, there we go.
I can see it now. Lovely. Thank you. So the first couple of slides, just for the benefit of the committee, give an overview of the structure of the partnership. There we go. Thank you. And it's under what legislation exists. So I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So the requirement to establish multi-agency safeguarding arrangements is set out in Working Together 2023. There are 3 statutory safeguarding partners in the children's part of the partnership, which are the local authority, the police, and the Integrated Care Board representing health. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So our lead safeguarding partners, as defined in the legislation, are the Chief Constable, the Chief Executive of the local authority, and the Chief Executive of the ICB, and their duties as per Working Together are set out there. They operate working jointly with Swindon, because we share a police force with Swindon, and the ICB currently covers Baines and Swindon and Wiltshire. So we meet jointly a couple of times a year. If I could have the next slide, please. And then the delegated safeguarding partners, again in the children's legislation, the Director of Children's Services, an Assistant Chief Constable, and the Chief Nursing Officer for the ICB. This is where in Wiltshire we do things slightly differently. So those 3 officers make up part of our executive, joined by the Adult Director of Social Care for Wiltshire Council, the Director of Public Health, the Chair of the Community Safety Partnership, as well as a secondary school head teacher providing the voice of education. That is because the SVPP, as Laura mentioned in the introduction, is an all-age partnership, so it incorporates the duties of both the Children's Multi-Agency Safeguarding Arrangements, the Adult Safeguarding Board, and the Community Safety Partnership. Have the next slide, please. Thank you. So the purpose overall of the partnership is to coordinate and facilitate multi-agency activity in relation to safeguarding across all of those groups. We provide assurance, accountability and challenge to each other in relation to the safeguarding system, support the strategic safeguarding leadership, promote multi-agency working and information sharing, crucially commission and coordinate case reviews, sharing and responding to local and national learning from those, raise awareness of abuse and neglect across the system, and strive to impact on practice and drive system improvement. And if I could have the next slide, please. We have a set of strategic priorities from 2023 until April of next year, which you can see on the screen there, and they're underpinned by a need to learn and improve, support a preventative approach, and develop the leadership and culture. And if I could have the next slide, please. So some key highlights from our annual report. We heard around the MARAC redesign. MARAC is the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference, looks at perpetrators of domestic abuse as well as victims, ensuring that there's a robust multi-agency response to that. That is now sitting with the police operationally, but multi-agency partners are involved. Developed an all-age exploitation strategy that sits under the Community Safety Partnership, but we strengthened our links into the other parts of the system through that. We embedded the transitional safeguarding work that took place under the Children's Transformation Programme into adult social care. Undertook 5 walkabouts. Walkabouts are a multi-agency visit, in essence, to an agency to look at and celebrate their best practice, identify areas possibly for improvement, see what we can learn from each other. We undertook those with Medvivo, Salisbury Diocese, my notes, Astor Housing, Medvivo, Salisbury Diocese, Salisbury Hospital and the Army Welfare Service last year. The implementation of ICON. ICON is a suite of resources, comes from health. It's around babies cry, you can cope is the key message. So it's about supporting parents through messaging at all stages of their journey, through midwifery, health visiting, but now also into contact with police and social care around the challenges of babies crying, making sure that baby is safe, and then it's okay for the parent to take a break. We implemented a cannabis toolkit. This arose from part of one of our learning reviews to ensure that professionals are equipped to assess the impact on parenting capacity that the smoking of cannabis may have, and also oversaw a pilot of the Graded Care Profile 2 antenatal. The Graded Care Profile 2 is an NSPCC tool to assess the risk of neglect. They developed a new version, the GCP2A, to look specifically at the antenatal period, and our partners at RUH and HCRG Care Group undertook that pilot as part of a national pilot, and we're now considering if we're going to roll that out locally.
Richard, can you just, sorry, I didn't hear you when you talked about the all-age exploitation strategy. Sorry, can you go back? I don't know
Yes.
who's doing the slides. Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear what you said, what that is.
So the all-age exploitation strategy, within the Community Safety Partnership, we have a strategic exploitation group, and we then have a subgroup for looking at exploitation of adults and a subgroup looking at exploitation of children. So it's the multi-agency strategy of how we're responding to the risks around exploitation, be that child sexual exploitation, child criminal exploitation, but also the exploitation of adults, risks of cuckooing and so on. Thanks. Could I have the next slide? Thank you. Priority 1, domestic abuse. The domestic abuse strategy was updated, and that's been incorporated into the Community Safety Partnership strategy. We will be undertaking a repeat referrals to MARAC audit, strengthening the use of data for the behaviour change steering group, but for other groups as well. Monitoring the impact of MATAC. MATAC is the multi-agency tasking and coordination group. That's again run by the police. It's a model that has come from other parts of the country. That looks at repeat offenders of domestic abuse, but those who are not perhaps deemed to be at high enough risk, who are not monitored by other multi-agency groups. So it's, I suppose, a kind of a stopgap to make sure that there is multi-agency oversight of those individuals. And then continuing our training delivery around domestic abuse, the DASH, which is the Domestic Abuse Risk Assessment Tool, and MARAC courses to ensure professionals have the information they need to make high quality referrals and robust information sharing. Thank you. Under our exploitation priority, I mentioned the publication of the strategy. That's being embedded and its effectiveness monitored. The strategic subgroup I've mentioned, and there's significant work going on within the police around how they deal with exploitation, and the police are providing an update to partners in Safeguarding Week next week. Safeguarding unborn babies and under ones. We published or updated some BSWs, Bain, Swindon and Wiltshire wide protocols, a pre-birth protocol and the sudden and unexpected death in infancy policy and pathway back in October. We repeated an audit looking at under ones and work with fathers, the results of which will be available soon. And again, that's across Bain, Swindon and Wiltshire. The new policies and protocols are being monitored by the ICB, and they will report back in to the partnership. And I kind of mentioned the ongoing rollout there, and I'm pleased to report that Wiltshire Children's Services were praised for their early adoption of that compared to other areas across the BSW footprint. I could have the next slide. Thank you. Transitional safeguarding. So following work completed under the Children's Transformation Programme FACT, this now sits operationally in adult social care, with a real focus on those individuals who are becoming adults who have been or are at high risk of exploitation. And in the next few weeks, there will be a soft launch of that and then further cascading of learning and training to professionals as needed. And if I could have the next one, thank you. Social, emotional and mental health, that has in the last year had a focus around adults. We have brought AWP, been keeping closely in touch with them through their transformations, the provider of adult mental health services, although they do provide some services to over 16s as well. And added some additional pages to our website and introduced training around the Mental Capacity Act. And then if I could have the last one, thank you. And just to touch on our case review activity in relation to children, we received 5 referrals last year in relation to children. No serious incident notifications were made to the Department for Education. And we held 2 local learning events, leading to 7-minute briefings for practitioners to share learning. And a brief summary is there for you.
Brilliant. Can I just, it's a really trivial point. Is that 7-minute briefings or 7 1-minute briefings? We didn't quite understand what the 7-minute briefings were.
It is 2 briefings that should take 7 minutes to digest. So there's evidence to suggest that if you create a briefing that takes 7 minutes, it can be easily digested by professionals through a team meeting or just in a kind of a snapshot of time. So it's a guidance from the DFE around 7-minute briefings.
Goes to my heart about good discipline, about being succinct. We should all learn this. Thank you. Any thoughts or comments from the group? I suppose again, you know, Rich and I have been in this job for a very long time. And I've sat in various iterations of this, I don't know what we would call it, group. And the only question I ask is it keeping children safe? You know, there's a lot of, I suppose it's a bit my education question. There's a lot of stuff. And I mean, these partnerships really were brought about because of the terrible cases when a child has slipped through between lots of different agencies. And we all say, oh gosh, why did that happen? It mustn't ever happen again. And it's a hard question for you to answer, but do you feel that the partnership is functioning well, that we are sharing information, that, you know, I mean, the MASH forms part of that, but that our partners are engaged and are not leaving it to us as the local authority to protect children?
So I've only been in post since April, but I would say that at this point, I am confident, certainly around the engagement of our partners. We have really good engagement for our partners, particularly in the police and the ICB, despite the transformation currently ongoing in that way. We have a structure with many different subgroups looking at different areas, and we have really good engagement. And what shines through at those is the passion of the individuals to make a difference. Is everything perfect? Absolutely not. But I think certainly within the local authority, there is really robust analysis and good use of data. You've heard, much of it, and will have sight of it through your committee here. We take, I suppose, the highlights of that, both the things that are being done really well by each of those agencies, but also those areas of challenge. And I think there is a real spirit of openness and bringing that to the table and saying, we recognise that this is not going well at the moment, and this is what we are doing about it. A couple of examples. Recently, schools flagged an issue with the Operation Encompass system. Operation Encompass is a system by which, if the police attend an incident at a home where a child is present for a domestic abuse incident, the system sends an alert overnight to the school or the early years setting if they have registered to receive that. And there was noted some considerable delay with that system. It had been highlighted to the police already. It came to our attention through a practitioner forum. I was able to contact the superintendent who oversights that area, and he was able to then connect me with the team to provide further reassurance that this is what has been done. We put together a communication to send out to schools via the safeguarding education team that says the police are aware of this. This is what they've already done. We think it's now okay, but if it isn't, this is who you should contact, and to try and reassure through that. So I think this morning you may have missed it because you may have started your meeting already, but Surrey have just produced their report on the murder of Sarah Sharif, and looking through the recommendations there, sadly some of those are the things that, as you say, we have seen again and again and again. It's a challenge, it's a challenging area to work in, but I think what we have at the moment is we have a partnership which is relatively mature. We've been working well. We have good consistency of membership. We have good attendance and good engagement. And I think we're doing what we can to try and keep those children safe.
Thank you. It's a very good answer, and it's very poignant on the day that the report from Surrey has been produced. And as you say, we keep saying, how does it happen? But it does happen, and humans are human. But all we can do is make sure that we've got these sort of partnerships in place, and certainly things have improved significantly, certainly since you and I have been involved. So thank you. Any other thoughts or comments from anybody? No. Well, thank you very much, which is really, really good. And as it's an annual report, I assume we will see it again in a year's time.
You will, unless I think we've asked if there is anything else you would like in between, then please reach out.
I mean, again, to my point about being very visual, I think any sort of case studies or anything that you can use to bring it to life are really helpful for members, because, again, it's hard to understand how this whole system works with all the different partners. So anything you can do to bring it to life in that respect would be really good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we're making good progress. So we now move on to item 9, which is the Wiltshire Council adoption report. So people will be aware it's a statutory requirement that the Council Adoption Services provides a year-end report. Adoption West is commissioned by Wiltshire Council and 5 other councils in the region to provide adoption services. Adoption West is scrutinised by a joint scrutiny panel, which has representatives from each of the commissioning local authorities, and we're very lucky that Councillor Julie Vine is the Wiltshire representative. The annual report of the scrutiny panel is included for your consideration, and so I invite Nettie and Nicole to introduce the report and highlight any issues you'd like us to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand straight over to Nettie to talk through the report and then welcome any questions afterwards.
Oh, I see. I do. You can just do it with your magnetic personality. We don't need any pictures.
There's a challenge, Laura.
It's easy for you, Nettie.
Okay, afternoon. I'm Nettie Lee. I'm Head of Support and Safeguarding. So taking you through our adoption report. So this relates through to the 21 children in Wiltshire that were placed for adoption during the time period of this report. We have 3 scorecard measures. We have scorecard indicator A20, which looks at the speed of care proceedings and decision makings for permanence for children.
Wiltshire's score for the last year is 294 days. We're performing better than national and regional averages despite a rise from the previous year. So in terms of the swiftness of those decision makings and court proceedings, we're doing very well regionally and nationally, which is good for children because the quicker they achieve permanence, the better that is for them. Scorecard A2 measures the time from the date that the placement order is made by the court. That placement order gives permission for local authorities to start doing searches for an adoptive match for a child. So that's called home finding. Again, we're slightly above target, but we're still doing better than national and statistical neighbours. So for Wiltshire, our performance was 171 days. Our target is between 140 and 160, but the national average is 205 days. So although we've seen a slight increase there, it's nothing that we're unduly worried about, and we do regularly review our targets because we are very ambitious, and we do like to keep to timescales for children because they're important decisions. Scorecard A10 measures the time from entering care, so that's the time the child becomes a child in our care, to when the child moves following an adoption match and home finding. The child would then move to the adoptive carers before an application is made for an adoption order, which is the final order for that child. And that assesses how quickly children are moved into their permanent homes. And Wiltshire are performing better than all comparators, so that's regionally and nationally. So we achieved 349 days. Our target is between 300 and 380, and the national average is 475 days. I did have a lovely graph, but you can't see it. Hopefully it can be sent out later. So the scorecard overview, our performance remains strong. It's consistently better than national, regional and statistical averages, especially in A10. 70% of children adopted exceeded one or more scorecard targets, but delays were either because it was in the child's best interests. So, for example, sometimes we have a group of siblings that need to be adopted, and we are very tenacious about prolonging that matching for adoption to search for that right family if we think that is the right plan for that child. Sometimes children need a little bit more therapeutic intervention before they're emotionally ready to be matched for adoption. Some of that is due to external factors. That can be delays in court proceedings. We have family group conferencing in Wiltshire, and we have a very strong pre-proceedings system. And we have family group conferencing where we work with families to identify if there are connected or extended family members that could care for children, so we retain them within our family, which is always our prime objective. But sometimes it takes to get right into court proceedings and near the end of court proceedings before families say, actually, I didn't think this was going to happen and I will put myself forward for this child. So sometimes we see delays in court, which then affects our adoption, because sometimes their assessment isn't necessarily positive. Small cohorts, because we have small numbers, can create volatility in the performance data. We regularly review our targets to ensure they remain ambitious and child focused. We have really good quality assurance with quarterly reporting and oversight by senior leadership. And challenges in adopter recruitment and care proceedings are reflected nationally. That's not just a regional issue. Nationally, we are seeing a real slowdown, as in adults presenting themselves to be assessed as foster carers. We're also seeing that in the adoption space currently. Adoption sufficiency, so the recruitment remains uncertain with fluctuating number of registrations and assessments. Although 72 adopters were approved, a 20% increase, this fell short of the projected 80 plus needed to meet demand for the South West region, of which we are part of. At the year end, only 43 adopters were in assessment, the lowest point of the year, raising concerns about that future sufficiency. Adoption West are responding with targeted training and strategic initiatives, but the impact is yet to be seen. And placement challenges persist for older children, sibling groups and those with additional needs, sometimes requiring searches beyond the region. Those pressures contribute to the longer timescales and increased complexity in securing timely, suitable matches. So the less number of adopters, the longer children will wait because of the number of children that are waiting to be placed for adoption, which will impact on the performance scorecards. In terms of the quality of our work, Adoption West report on the quality of the work of all the local authorities that report into the regional agency. So our child permanence report, we received 64% were good and 16% excellent. And our adoption placement report, 76% were good and 24% excellent. That's really reflected of the impact of training initiatives that we do alongside Adoption West to improve child focused and the high quality documentation really. And we get further feedback on that once we get Adoption Panel's annual report, which reports on our feedback and all of the other local authorities' feedback. We recently adopted the new child permanence record template in 2025, which places a much greater emphasis on the child's identity, their lived experience and their emotional journey. That document is a record for that child to read at the appropriate time that shows why decisions were made about them, why their parents were unable to care for them. And the timings of those decisions. We had regional training on the new template in November. That was led by Adoption West, and our early adoption of this compared to other local authorities really does reflect the commitment we have to best practice and the national priorities for adoption. Placements and disruptions summary. 5 children were placed outside of the Adoption West area, which was consistent with the year before. And those decisions are carefully overseen and based on individual needs. 2 adoption plans were reversed for children post-placement because we weren't able to find suitable adoptive matches. We don't leave children waiting too long post-placement order to look at an alternative plan for them. 3 placement disruptions occurred, which is very sad, but that does happen on occasion, and that included 1 sibling group of young children. And key factors included the children's age, their health needs and transition challenges. Whenever we have those disruptions, we look at the themes and we share that across the regional partnership and internally so that we can learn from that for future children. We always respond very swiftly to any disruptive cases. Early permanence is where adopters are also approved as foster carers. So they can take children from birth as foster carers with the view that that child is likely to be placed for adoption. They would then become their adoptive carers. Sufficiency is impacted significantly in this area. Nationally, there's a lack of adopters that are approved for early permanence placements. We referred 10 babies for early permanence placements last year. We were only able to secure 1 early permanence placement for children. We still refer every time we need it because we're tracking that we have that need that isn't being met at this current time for early permanence. Care proceedings and systemic reforms. So delays in care proceedings remain a challenge, which are often due to external factors like court processes and late assessments. I'm the new chair of the Family Justice Board, so I'm in a good position to drive any improvements that are needed across social care, the partnership and with the judiciary. We were part of a DFE pilot around early involvement of CAFCAS and case management meetings, and that has now been adopted as best practice both locally and nationally. Wiltshire's care applications are very well regarded. There's no concerns raised by CAFCAS guardians with regard to the quality of our court work. The Council is sharing learning nationally and implementing targeted improvements, including a new tracking system which we launched in October, which gives us enhanced oversight and reduces delays for children. I think that really does reflect Wiltshire's commitment to security, timely permanence and good outcomes for children. And then moving on to the financial summary, you will see that we have a budget, that we are slightly overspent on that budget. You can see the breakdown predominantly within adoption support, and we are currently waiting for the DFE to advise us about what our next budget amount will be. Does anybody have any questions?
Brilliant. Thank you, Nettie. Julie, do you want to say anything? Have you done anything yet, so to speak, in your role?
In my role as supporting the scrutiny, we've met twice. It's been very informative. For me, it's been quite a steep learning curve, as of course you would be. But I want to ask a question, if I may, Nettie, about the early permanence, because that hasn't come up at the scrutiny at all. Either I haven't noticed it, or haven't seen it, or haven't been aware. You said there were 9 babies put forward, but only one.
We put 10 babies forward for early permanence, and we only got matched with 1.
Because I'm aware when we have discussions with the other areas that contribute to Adoption West, that some areas have greater numbers of need. Bristol, for instance, is quite high. And so I'm a bit concerned about if we're not getting our just allocation in response to the need. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't say that very well.
I don't sit on the board. Nicole sits on the board. It might be easier for her to.
It's a good question, though, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely a good question. So it wouldn't necessarily be about an allocation per area. It would be about careful consideration of available adopters who are approved and are open to early permanence and being foster carers that would be able to match with that child and meet their need. Because also what we'd be asking is, for instance, if we had adopters who were approved for adoption and interested in early permanence, if we had a baby that needed a home, but they lived somewhere else in the region, for instance in Cornwall, let's say, for argument's sake, it wouldn't be practical for us to place that baby with them, because during the court process we'd need that baby to still be having contact with birth family, etc. The commute wouldn't be doable. So sometimes factors like that would come into it, but it would be based on the individual needs of that child and matching them with the potential adopter or potential adoptive family that is available. We do know that nationally there is a real challenge in that space at the moment, because there isn't a guaranteed outcome at the end that that child would stay with you through adoption. There is always the potential that that child may go back to live with a birth parent, or there may be another family member that comes forward. And sometimes that can be quite difficult in terms of an emotional journey for adopters to consider. But I would say that we do have a strong support programme and a strong recruitment training offer through Adoption West that tries to help alleviate some of those anxieties and encourage adopters to really think about that as an option.
Okay, thank you very much. Adoption West do incredibly good work out there, very conscientious and consistent, along with their support to adopters and the foster carers. I think they come in contact with foster carers, and it's quite phenomenal, really. So I'm hoping that Wiltshire will continue to.
Adoption West does seem to be working as a concept, from what I understand. Would you agree?
So Adoption West does work well. The data tells us that it works well. It is a jointly owned company, which is incredibly unique in the regional adoption agency space. We're the only one in the country that's factored in that way. The current agreement is due to come to an end in 2027, but it's already being discussed, and it has been discussed at board. So there are proposals coming forward around next steps and what we do in terms of extending that agreement and what the options might be.
Great. Any other comments from anybody? Thank you. So will it come to Cabinet, or has it been to Cabinet?
It will need to come to Cabinet, yes. But I think we were waiting for confirmation of a date, so we'll check that it's been booked onto the forward plan.
And does it go to full council as well?
Yes.
It does. Okay. So I don't know when that will be. I can't remember when we last presented it, but it will need to come to full council, I think, because we have to do a statute. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Good. Okay, Nettie, you're right to turn your microphone up, but thank you very much for presenting. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so next item on the agenda is Cabinet Member and Portfolio Holders update. I realise have we had apologies from the Cabinet Member? No. Okay. Shame. Portfolio holders, do you want to update us on what you've been up to? Okay. Can you come and use the mic?
I've just done a 1-2 school visits with Councillor Hubbard, which have been great to go around and see sort of small mainstream primary schools who are trying to do some more with resource bases as well. So that's been very, very good to see. It's very encouraging to see that people or schools are wanting to do that and actually encouraging us to join talk to them about it. So, but other than that, that's everything.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Good. Okay. We've got the forward work programme on pages 167 to 170. Has anyone got anything on that? No. No. Okay. I mean, Julie keeps a tight eye on it. Tells me what to do. Is there anything you need?
Well, the director.
Oh, sorry. Apologies. Directors, have you got anything you'd like to update on?
I do.
Good.
Thank
Sorry,
you, Chair.
I missed that opportunity.
A nice positive update to share from Families and Children's. It has been announced this week that we have been successful as a council in our bid to be the South West Regional Partner for Foundations Evidence into Practice. So previously was known as the What Works Centre for Children and Families, which people may have heard of. They have chosen one local authority in each of the 9 regions nationally to deliver over an 18-month period a pilot scheme of testing out some of the parenting schemes that they've developed. And so we will be using 2 of those schemes in our family hubs with an aim that we'll be supporting some of our children and families where there are emerging social, emotional and mental health presentation needs. So trying to really support those children who may otherwise come forward for EHCP application and supporting them to remain in kind of mainstream and community services where possible. So it's literally just been announced. We have our internal launch meeting with officers next week. And so we'll be sharing updates as and when we can.
That's great news. Well done. Catherine.
Thank you. I just want to draw everybody's attention to the fact that on Monday night this week, our family and community learning team hosted their annual awards evening. Actually, Stuart, John and I all had the honour of presenting awards on the night. It was really quite a wonderful and moving event, hearing about some of the journeys that those learners had been on as adults, overcoming some really significant barriers in order to be able to engage in learning as adults. And yeah, I'll be looking forward. I've seen that some of the case studies for those learners have been shared today with our comms team and are going to be shared with the winner's permission, I believe, John. So yeah, really a really important event, and the role of that family and community learning team is an important one.
Put a note in for Dom because he worked so hard on that as well. It's a service that's just gone from strength to strength, hasn't it? And it is life-changing. It really is, for people who've missed out on education for whatever reason earlier in life, to have it as an adult, and the impact's even greater. So I just got a note. Brilliant, thank you. Sorry that I didn't give you your opportunity before. So yes, forward work plan we're happy with, and the date of the next meeting is the 21st of January. So I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you very much indeed. And we've done it in less than 2 hours. So thank you very much, everybody.